when they say, well, we're fine with you, just not in sports. As soon as you give that, then it's like, well, actually, we don't want you around children. Well, actually, children can't be trans. Well, actually, there's no such thing as trans. And it's more and more and more, just you cannot cede any ground to a fascist, period.
Welcome to Transparency Talk, a channel for trans people to tell their stories, share their successes, and inspire others with some much-needed good news, especially in the current political environment. I'm your host, Ember, a 44-year-old woman of transgender experience. If you want more trans-positive content like this, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Welcome to Transparency Talk. Today, I'm joined by Alana McLaughlin, a U.S. Army Special Forces vet decorated with 8 medals, a professional MMA fighter with an undefeated record, and a fine arts degree holder, among many, many other things. She joins us today to talk about her accomplishments, the obstacles she's had to overcome, and specifically an article published recently in direct response to one of her own pieces. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to begin at the beginning, as it were. When did you know?
For better or worse, my experience very much fits the old school, like I knew when I was little narrative. I was probably... the first time I really had any indication that things were different, I had to be 4, maybe. I was old enough to develop a conscious memory of this thing, but I got in trouble because I was playing with some kids next door, 2 boys, and instead of doing rough and tumble shit, I was making mud pies and serving them, and I was having my little kitchen thing. I kept getting in trouble for not acting like a boy, and that started very young. So, it's
it's very relatable. We get a lot of pushback from the gender critical crowd about how kids can't possibly tell. The kids don't have to tell when the adults are telling us, you can't do that because you're X.
Well, everything that they say is entirely self-contradictory anyway. They'll say that kids can't possibly know, but then they'll also say that if you didn't know when you were a child, then you're an autogynephile, and they start trotting out 1950s junk science. So just like, they say that trans women shouldn't be allowed to compete in sport if we've gone through puberty, and then they do everything they can to make sure we can't get access to puberty blockers. So, it should be super obvious to anyone paying any attention at all that this is just an attempt to outright eradicate us. But, there's a lot of people that really like that fig leaf and like to pretend like things aren't as serious as they are. So
we got to keep those blinders on and keep the dollars rolling. So you mentioned in your article that your self-acceptance had to evolve over time. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Well, I knew who I was. I was trying really hard not to. I had a vested interest in not acknowledging my femininity because, I grew up in the 80s and 90s in the South. It was not a welcoming environment. I would like to hope that things are better now, but I haven't been in the South for about a decade now. So, I don't know. It was difficult. I spent years trying to convince myself that I was not only a man, but like the manest man. I was trying to model a personality on like Conan the Barbarian, Wolverine, the Terminator, like the typical, strong, silent, whatever. And that's how I ended up in Special Forces. So
it makes sense.
We are.
Because I was just thinking back on your service record. You were in for, 6 years? 8 years?
6 years. Just 6
years.
6 active duty and then 2 inactive, but that's, that just means they can call you back.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's about as manly as it gets,
So I'm told.
What are some unexpected discoveries about yourself that you found after you started to transition? Like things you weren't expecting? I
guess sort of my discovery that we actually need other people in our lives. The realizing that I do in fact depend on other people, and I guess the most surprising one for me was discovering that I actually would have liked to have had kids. That was something that I never let cross my mind pre-transition. I just figured, like, I know I have all these major problems, and I couldn't subject a child to my disgusting whatever, because that's the messages I was getting about being trans. So I just I always said, I'll never have kids. I don't want to have kids. And then, of course, a year or two after surgery, now I'm sitting here going, well, now it's even longer than that. But a year or two after surgery, I started thinking, like, man, I think I'd have been a good parent. I think I would have liked to raise kids. And now that that possibility is extremely remote, because being a single trans woman, well, I mean, not single, but I'm not married. Being a trans woman who is 41 with no real job, who's a cage fighter, and just the cost of adoption is in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's in addition to the actual cost of raising a child. So it is unlikely that I will ever be a parent. But the biggest surprise to me was suddenly discovering that that's something I wanted for myself, unfortunately.
We find all kinds of interesting things about ourselves as we go through, and it surprises me how many people are surprised by things that they themselves had to repress because of social pressure from the outside.
Yeah.
We don't let ourselves want certain things because we're told we can never have them.
Well, often the social consequences are dire as well, even transition, like, my example, and I'm glad that this isn't as common as it used to be, but I lost my entire family, and that's just how it goes. I have very little support system outside of what I've built for myself.
Sure. So yeah, obviously family's a bust, and you mentioned some of the issues with that in your article as well. As far as like friends or work colleagues, I'm not sure how your industry works, but I assume you have colleagues. Like have
not
other
exactly
people in your life been supportive?
So it's really friends. It's all found family kind of stuff. Other queer people that I know that are in my orbits. As far as the fight game itself, like, I don't have a lot of connections within the mixed martial arts world because, frankly, it's a hardcore right-wing space. And I would say like 95% of MMA gyms, coaches, fighters, promotions are all like seriously right-wing in their politics. And I guess that's no surprise, because the Gracie family, who brought Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to the U.S., who originated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they themselves are hardcore fascists. Like they started off as like they had the political party that was like the equivalent of the Nazi party in Brazil. They're fascist.
What fun.
And that's the fathers of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is kind of the base that every mixed martial artist trains in to be effective in the cage. So, it's the propaganda's there. If you look up a portrait of Helio Gracie, you'll see, he's sitting there in front of a red flag with a white circle and a black lightning bolt through it. And it's very fascist imagery.
Yeah. It's a little subtle. Yes.
Super subtle.
Everywhere you turn in life, it seems like you're hitting a wall of solid bullshit.
Yeah.
Has there been somebody who stood out as like a light of support who's been there for you and like who's influenced you positively, I suppose?
When I needed it, not really. Since I've, kind of become a self-actualized adult person, I've had quite a few friends that have like really buoyed me and kind of carried me on my way. But, back when I was really struggling, I didn't really have that kind of support,
Oof. I get that. That's one of the reasons that the more and more of us, and I presume yourself as well, are doing everything we can to be visible and spread positivity, support where we can and so forth. Because
and as much as I can be positive, I'm often accused of being pessimistic. I can't imagine that.
Yeah. But you just, speaking only for myself, I feel like a lot of us don't want other people to feel as isolated and alone as we were having to go through things.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
on that note, what? Perhaps it's related, perhaps it's not. But why did you decide to become an MMA fighter?
Well, I guess on the selfish side, it was something I wanted to do pre-transition. And I still firmly believe that if I hadn't transitioned, if I'd been able to go on living as a cisgender man, that I would have been in the UFC a decade ago. When I left college and went into the Army and then went back to college, I was really upset that I wasn't able to finish out my my athletic eligibility. I guess it expired while I was in the Army, because I ran cross country in college. And I guess, once you start that 4 to 5 year clock, it ticks down whether you're there doing it or not. So, I'm not the most competitive person. I'm not like one of those, I have to win at everything. I'm the best at smelling flowers, but I do have a little bit of a competitive streak, and especially when it comes to physical challenges, I really do enjoy competition. And I did want to still be competitive in a sport. And for me, fighting is kind of the one, I want to do marathons and ultra marathons and stuff like that. And when I can't fight anymore, I'll definitely shift my focus to ultra marathons, assuming my joints are still all in place. That's the selfish side of it. The other side is that, Fallon Fox and I we're friends, and she was telling me, well, partly I wanted to kind of take some of the heat off her, because every time there was an argument involving a trans woman in combat sports, her name was inevitably brought up. And they'll trot out a video where they've pitch shifted her voice down by 2 octaves, and, just tell a bunch of lies about her, oh, she broke her opponent's skull. We kind of saw the writing on the wall back in 2014 when the marriage equality fight was lost by, reactionary people. And I kind of recognized that the focus was going to shift to trans people. And I felt like, anything that I could do to sort of get in there and increase visibility, kind of try to represent the trans community in a positive way, was going to be, a good thing. I think it was probably the right call, because I see a lot of trans women that are ostensibly trying to be combat sports athletes, but they are doing this sort of self-loathing, I'm going to be one of the good ones and only fight men and or other trans women, and I've had a couple of those, try to challenge me, and none of them, frankly, not to be try not to get a big head here, but none of them are on my level. And the one girl, she did a tough man fight and let them play Dude Looks Like a Lady as her walkout music. And I'm like, if you don't have the self-respect to stand up for yourself and have a shred of dignity, I'm not even gonna give you the time of day, So
Right.
I felt like I had sort of an obligation to set a better example than that.
How do you think it's going? I know you've had a lot of trouble finding more fights since that Provost match.
Yeah. So like I said, most of the challenges I've gotten have been from other trans women that are trying to sort of thread that needle of I'm going to be one of the good ones. And it never works out for them. There was another girl in Florida that actually fought a couple of men in MMA bouts, a regional level. And I think she beat one of them and lost to another one. And still everybody treated her like shit. And she's like, I don't understand. I'm doing everything right. And I was like, I told you. Anyway,
it's not about following the rules.
So as far as it goes for me, I've had a serious inquiry from another fighter. I think she's fought for Invicta before, and I would love to fight for Invicta. But right now, I'm kind of juggling a couple different possibilities. The only really serious offer I have on the table right now is a really shitty one, but I'm probably going to take it. My intention was to, I only want to fight people that are on a similar level of training as me in the women's category, period. But this offer that I've gotten was probably a flippant one from, a promotion that's, I don't think they're based in the U.S. They do a lot of their fights overseas, and this would have to be overseas for it to be sanctioned, because they were like, well, we'll pay you to fight a man. And, it's a lot more money than I've ever made in a fight before. And I'm probably going to take it. I wasn't going to, but then I got to thinking, with the state of trans women in sports right now, I certainly can't make things any worse, especially if you look at the row around the Olympics with Iman Khalif, who's not trans, and just the reaction to the specter of the possibility of her even being trans or intersex was enough to cause the entire world to freak out. So, if I do go get paid a lot of money to get in a fight with a man, like, okay, like I've gotten in fights with lots of men where I didn't get paid at all. So, but like I said, I think the bar is in hell right now. So I don't think there's anything that I can do that's going to make it worse for trans women in sports, because it's about as bad as it can get. Yeah.
But also, one of the things that we learn as we go through our transition is that we have to take care of ourselves. And I think this falls under that category. Like, you have to pay the bills. You have to be able to eat, Yeah.
Yeah. That is definitely a consideration. And while I have had the good fortune to find a house that I could afford, that is my cute little pointy house that I talked about in the documentary and other things, it's an 84-year-old house, and I'm the third owner, and the second one was a landlord. So there's a lot of deferred maintenance. There's no air conditioning. She needs a little work, and I don't have the budget for it right now. So got to do something.
I could go on a whole tangent about places.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why I moved to Pittsburgh. That's where I could afford a house,
Okay. Yeah.
It's where I could afford a house, and where I'm less likely to be lynched walking down the street. Like, sure, I could go get a house in South Carolina if I wanted to ever go back there, but I don't. I absolutely have nothing to take me back to South Carolina.
Your article had a theme about society telling you to be the bigger person, by which they meant to put yourself behind everyone else, to sacrifice your needs for others' want, to give up your comfort for theirs, and under no circumstances should you ever rock the boat. Do I have that about right?
That is precisely correct.
I got to ask, why did you write it? What effect were you hoping for?
Well, honestly, initially it was part of the promotion for the documentary. I got a message from Micah Fremowitz, who was like, hey, we've got a spot for you doing an opinion piece for Newsweek. And I guess they'd seen that I've written for The Guardian before. They recognize that I'm capable of forming a complete sentence. So I wrote this piece, and they had a list of questions that they figured they would like me to answer. And I think they expected probably a lot more of a sort of just a very bare bones, like almost like an interview without an interviewer. But I happened to glance through some of the previous pieces that had been written, and I saw that people took a little more artistic liberty with it. So I figured I would do the same. And I just banged it out overnight, like a 2-hour session, sat down and wrote it down. And it was almost stream of consciousness, honestly. I felt like I just needed to get some things off my chest. I guess the frustrating thing is that a lot of folks that should probably hear this message are, they start commenting without even reading it, And of course, as always, if you're queer or trans or whatever, don't read the comments. It's just a shit show.
As always. Yeah, I don't know. It struck me when I read it the first time. I mean, we're in a Discord server together, and my first thought was that it's really powerful because there's parts of it that really speak to me. It comes across as a little poetic without trying to be, things that try to be poetic often come off as a little pompous,
Let's try not to put on airs too much.
That's it. Yeah. Comment sections notwithstanding, you did get a response, and it was certainly something. Like as for example,
yeah. Let me pull it up on my phone here, since I know what we're discussing.
Yeah.
Here we go.
It's an article from a random sports fan-ish website
from a content mill. It is a content mill. I have no question about that. But yeah, it's like every time there's a slow news day, they've written probably 5 or 6 articles about me, and they actually vary in tone and content quite a bit. And I'm not certain if it's. I know at least initially there wasn't AI articles being written a couple years ago. So, but it's always a different author. So I'm assuming they just kind of hire someone like freelance to just knock something out real quick. If I may say so myself, it is not nearly as well written as mine.
I tend to agree, although I do have to give either the Fiverr employee or the AI bot, whichever it happens to be, partial credit. for gendering you correctly, which we often don't see in critical articles.
And that's such a low bar to clear too, right?
Right.
But I feel like that's how they sort of give themselves the illusion of being unbiased, because if they just misgender us from the get-go, it's a clear indicator of what the article is going to say, you know?
They're a little more subtle with sneaking in their preconceptions and biases.
Slightly, only barely, because like one of the, watch Alana McLaughlin defeat Celine Provost below, and then they link to Genevieve Gluck, who is like a hardcore turf. So
there's a few of those. They've got they're all Twitter links for one thing, which is great.
No, I would love to know who is doing like the scraping for this to like figure out what they're gonna do their content on. But no, I mean, I feel like, honestly, I don't think this outlet even has any agenda at all, except that they are generating content to make money off of, because there are a ton of ads on this too.
Oh, yes. My goodness. The page, when I pulled it up to get to the section I wanted to focus on, the page keeps jumping around as ads load and reload and so forth. It's trippy as hell. The one section I really wanted to focus on, because it seems to contain the essence of what we're getting at here. It says, McLaughlin, a former U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, is intent on not letting the overwhelming public sentiment against her and those like her deter her from campaigning for trans inclusivity in sports.
I feel like that is colored specifically by the experience of whoever this is only getting their information online, because it seems like in person and, polling would bear out the fact that trans women, trans folks in general, queer people in general have been gaining increasing acceptance all over the place. But there is, like, especially online, a lot of, I don't use this word flippantly, fascists, outright fascists who like confess to this on their profiles, where they're retweeting, the little memes about Hitler and how, the world owes him an apology and shit like that, like actual fucking Nazis. They like running with this this narrative that the world has seen how crazy the queers are, and now they're finally coming to their senses, and they'll start hating us again like they're supposed to. I feel like there's a touch of that in this. It seems pretty evident that whoever wrote this has not interacted with a bunch of queer people or actually spent much time outside. It seems like they're very much, that this is why I think it could have been AI generated, is because everything on here came off of a Twitter thread.
Twitter, infamously home of Nick Fuentes, a proud Nazi, Matt Walsh, who lists right in his bio, fascist, open Christian nationalist. There's so many people who are just, they talk about how horrible it is that queer people are willing to, first of all, they lump us all together, the trans people, gay people, bi people, all the people. If you're not straight, cis, het, you're a queer people.
And this is why I tell people never cede an inch of fucking ground, because when they say, well, we're fine with you, just not in sports. As soon as you give that, then it's like, well, actually, we don't want you around children. Well, actually, children can't be trans. Well, actually, there's no such thing as trans. And it just, it's more and more and more, just, you cannot cede any ground to a fascist, period. Always push back, always fight back, plant your feet and start swinging. That's the only way we win.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I'm constantly advocating for advocacy, intersectional advocacy with the whole group of gender and sexual minorities, with other minorities, women broadly, brown people broadly, all of us, because
we should all be united in common struggle, period.
Yeah.
And, I don't even know who said it, because I've heard it so often, until all of us are free, none of us are free. And, like a lot of my entry into politics in general, it started off with like Feminist Collective and at UNCA when I went there after college went there after the Army. And then it went from there to, when I got to Portland, I think the first big thing I was trying to get to was to go be part of the occupation at Standing Rock. But I didn't really have any resources to bring to the table there. And people on the ground were saying, hey, if you don't have things to share to bring, sit it out, because you're just going to be draining the resources of the camp that was there already. So, but no, I've come to recognize that, for those of us that this current system wasn't built for, we have a common struggle and a common enemy.
Yeah, intersectionality is absolutely critical, because to them, we're all the same group.
Yeah.
And it's, so do you focus mostly on trans advocacy, or do you do work in other areas of intersectionality?
When it comes to my online presence, I wouldn't even consider that activism, honestly. That's just me kind of spitballing, shit posting, whatever, blowing off steam.
Hey, shit posting can be advocacy too.
It can be, but most of the work that I do, you'll never hear about. Most of the stuff I'm doing is kind of, we'll say, street level activism. And a lot of the places I've lived have had a lot of Nazis, and that's kind of been the primary thrust of my political work, is dealing with those kind of problems. I've done a lot of, resource sharing and advocacy for queer folks, for houseless folks, for Black and brown folks. And, for me, I'm very much trying to be a good accomplice to everyone that needs my sort of help, anyone that would find common cause with me. I'm doing my best to do that.
Hell yeah. And flipping that around the other way, have you found that being involved in the broader community, has that enriched your life?
Absolutely, without doubt, because if I were not making those connections and finding community that way, I would be lost, frankly. The majority of my friends are not just like, white trans people or white queers or whatever. Like the vast overwhelming majority of my close friends and confidants are POC, are people like Indigenous folks. I'm actually fairly certain I might be the only white person in my neighborhood. I think, this was definitely a redlined neighborhood before, because my neighbor Henrietta, she's been in her house for 65 years. So there's no question that this neighborhood was redlined. But yeah, no, I sip whiskey and have cookouts with my neighbors next door on this side. Like my life is incredibly enriched from knowing the people that I know.
Hell, just knowing your neighbors is rare these days.
Yeah, it really is. And I felt like it was really important for me to be a good neighbor as soon as I moved here, because frankly, like, a white queer moving into a redlined neighborhood, a lot of the time that's kind of a signal of, like, oh, gentrification's on the way. So, I felt like it was important for me to go out and be like, hey, I'm not rich. I'm not going to flip this house. Like, I think the exact words I used were, they'll have to dig me out of here like a tick. I intend to die here one day, and this is my neighborhood. And when I was flying back from LA for the press tour, there was a guy sitting next to me he's a landlord and he is a book author, and we were just chatting, and I was as pleasant with him as I could be. But, he found out where I lived, and he's like, oh, isn't it dangerous over there? And I was like, no, like not even a little bit. Like, Black people means dangerous? Like, come on, man. There's kids playing out here. Like, chill out.
Yeah, I was kind of idly wondering. I have a thing for swords, and I noticed the sword behind you is kind of opposite the door, and I'm like, is that like a burglar deterrent kind of thing?
No, that's decoration, and also it's completely functional. And I really enjoy not just making swords, but I'm actually planning to get into HEMA, and I'm going to be getting some kit here from a friend soon, and that is that's a Tinker Pierce longsword with some custom hilt fittings, and a friend of mine made a really nice waisted grip for it. So I'm a student of that particular martial tradition as well. And that's not so much a burglar deterrent, because if somebody comes in trying to steal something, well, I'll probably just give them something depending on what they need.
Surprising depth of knowledge about the sword, though. I was just expecting, like, even a decorative sword is useful once.
Yeah, well, this one's not decorative. Tinker Pierce is a good. It's kind of a budget brand, but it's made to handle business. It's not a simple wall hanger. Very
nice. I should have known better than to suspect anything you keep around would be just decorative.
Yeah. I actually have a great big two-handed mace next to the door that is like tempered and everything. It's also very functional, and it's not even the one that I made that we had in the documentary and all. It's a different one.
So you're all prepared for a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, I suppose so. Although that's not about just having weapons. Like, that's where the relationships with your neighbors comes in. You're not going to survive a zombie apocalypse if you don't have food and water and people that care about you, and a neighborhood that can come together in mutual defense and mutual aid. The American myth of the self-sufficient badass is exactly that. It is a myth. And I'm saying this as someone who probably comes the closest to that myth as anyone reasonably could.
I was just going to say, as someone who is actually a certified badass, that's saying something.
Yeah, I'm saying this as someone who is a skilled blacksmith, who knows how to plant a garden, who can do all of my home repairs in here, the former combat medic. I'm about as close as you can get to that, Renaissance fucking whatever. But I would still say that, like, it is absolutely imperative that you have community to survive anything like that. And I think that's a good lesson to keep in mind as we watch capitalism slowly collapsing in on itself. And community building is going to be the best way to approach that. Because I would say, even from an evolutionary standpoint, the thing that makes humanity adaptable, the thing that makes humanity survivable, is our socializing with each other, is our communities. We didn't survive because of our great big teeth and claws and liver eating, steroid abusing. It's all about community.
I used to say that creativity was our greatest superpower. It's as close to the divine as humans get. That, behold, I've created. But without community, no discovery means a damn thing, because it dies with the discoverer.
Yeah. If no one is there to witness your artistic genius, what does it mean? Nothing,
Yeah. I mean, hopefully it makes you happy and maybe makes your life a little easier. But, Robinson Crusoe can build a castle and no one is going to learn from it. That's it. Speaking of building castles, what goals or dreams do you have going forward?
Well, to build my castle, obviously. No, I mean, actually, on a serious note, like, I do want to get my house fixed up enough where, it's sort of modernized a little bit. I know I'm going to need a roof in a couple of years. I need to remodel my kitchen and bathroom because they're falling apart. Fix the drainage in the basement, install air conditioning. But those are all, I know that's not the kind of answers you're looking for here. So ultimately, I want to be a benefit to my community, whether that be trans people online or anarchists or communists or whoever, wherever, and in my immediate surroundings, my neighbors. I would like to. I think the last real dream that I have that I haven't accomplished is to be a self-supporting artist. So, but the thing is, right now I'm still young and healthy enough that I still want to keep fighting. But when I can't fight anymore, then I'll probably shift my focus to make art more the greater focus, art and literature. I do intend to write more. I've been trying to write a memoir for a long time, but frankly, I need a deadline. So I should probably, I'm with the increased media profile I have with the release of the documentary, I'm actively looking for like a literary agent. So hopefully I can get in advance and actually sit down and have a deadline and get this thing written.
Yeah. And that's a really great angle to take, because, with a highlighted positive exposure, that's like the only time you can catch agents.
So I've been told. Like, trust me, that wasn't a brilliant insight from me. That was from people around me saying, "Hey, now's the time." You know,
You have a wise community around you.
it certainly seems that way.
Yeah. All right. I've only got one more for you.
Okay.
What message of hope or advice would you give to a young transgender person just beginning their journey?
I wish I could say things are getting easier or that things will be easier, but I think it's become pretty apparent that we're going to have to keep fighting. And I would say the best little bit of hope I can give is that things aren't necessarily going to get easier, but you will get stronger. I wish we didn't have to be strong, but I think right now the moment calls for it.
Alana, thank you so much for sharing your story today. If people want to find you, follow you, find out more about you, where can we do that?
I'm still on Twitter because I like to suffer, I guess. I'm also on Instagram, but I'm not super active there. I'm on Facebook, but I never accept friend requests from anyone I haven't actually met. So yeah, I'm out there. I don't know. You can Google my name and find me on most social media platforms. I've been told I need to get on TikTok, but I haven't taken that step yet. The documentary, which I'm not making any money from at this point, that train has sailed. But it'll be on Fuse October 5th for anyone who wants to see it.
Cool. And what's the title of it for anybody who hasn't heard?
Unfightable. And as a former English major, I am still mildly annoyed that they made up a word for the title, but I didn't make that decision.
I mean, on the flip side, Shakespeare coined over 500 new words.
It's true. But I wouldn't be so arrogant as to compare us to Shakespeare with this project.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing what you get up to in the future.
Yeah, time will tell.
Thank you all so much for watching. Positive reflections in our community are so important right now, so please do subscribe and consider sharing this video on all the socials to help get the word out about what we're doing here. If you'd like to support this show, a link to our Ko-Fi is in the description. If you'd like to share your story, you can email the show at transparencytalkshow@gmail.com. Until next time, stay positive.